Hello, everybody. We're super pleased to be joining you at the Abertay Digital Graduate Show 2020 online. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate all of our graduates out there who've completed their studies. Well done, you made it through these crazy times. And secondly, I'd like to welcome you to a chat between myself, I'm Lynn Love, a lecturer at Abertay in Computer Arts, and one of our soon-to-be graduates, Niamh Loughran, who has just finished her fourth year as a game design and production student. Niamh, welcome.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Niamh. Good to see you all. As Lynn said, I'm one of the game design and production students, or GDP, and I just finished my project from Paris to Berlin, remote working in the video game industry, which you will be able to see in the website after.
Yeah, so remote working, what a timely project. Could you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, I know. So it's a bit crazy story because I chose this topic all the way back in October or November of last year, which was before anything COVID-19 related or pandemic related came out. And initially I saw it as a really interesting point of research because remote working, like working from home or working from a office space, is quite popular, especially in Dundee. Like we have the Biome Collective here, which is basically just like loads of separate companies working in the one space. A lot of them work remotely as well. So it is quite like an emergent practice in that it's starting to grow in popularity, and it has a lot of benefits like saving on office space and like they report like higher productivity from employees. So I thought it was an interesting point of study. So when I started researching it, I noticed that there was a gap in video game studies and remote working. They didn't really overlap very well. Now there's a lot of information from adjacent industries, but I thought like what inspired this project was to create a text that was for video game development.
Why do you think there's been that gap in video game development, remote working literature?
I just think that there's a lot of really things that play into it. I think, especially with bigger companies, they have non-disclosure agreements with their employees, which means that their employees aren't allowed to go out and talk about their experiences that they have in their workplace. Or it could be due to the fact that workplace processing and workflows doesn't really get documented very well, either because it's seen as unnecessary or because it's kind of like private company information, like similar to how McDonald's would work. Like they probably wouldn't tell people what their like job progression pyramid looks like because that's company secret information. So it's quite similar in the game industry in that point of people want to protect workplace practice, but really isn't useful for people who are learning about how to get into the industry and how to make change in the industry from that standpoint, because that information is missing for people like us. So it's up to us to create that information to have it there for people.
Yeah, so in this difficult landscape, how did you go about researching remote working?
So, funnily enough, I research remote working remotely. I was able to find a lot of information from like software industry and technology industry. It's also very in depth into the social scientists, into the social sciences and into the psychology section of like study, because it's not all just about economy and stock market and workplace behavior and business studies. It's about people to the very core, because in remote working we deal a lot with people working on their own, so you have to understand that from a very psychological standpoint of like what we can expect from workers when they're working at home, and like balancing that as to whether the current climate of the workplace is fair and just, and like that people are being treated properly. So I think there's a lot of things to consider. Like there's a lot of fields that stretch very widely across remote working, but I think it's dangerous to assume that we can just like copy and paste remote working across multiple different fields. We have to consider like the intricacy and the complications of stuff like game development, where you have all different types of disciplines working together.
Yeah, gosh. So a lot of us are finding ourselves working remotely now,
Yes.
in the new world that we're living in. Do you have any tips for people working specifically in computer games from what you've learned from your research?
Yeah, so part of my research was actually looking at different types of software that we use to stay connected to each other in these situations. So stuff like the chat that we're having now over video call, message channels in Slack, Discord, using project management software like Slack, not Slack, but Trello and Jira, and just keeping those those software kind of take the place of the physical activities you would have done in work, like having agile scrum, as we call it in the industry, of all standing around and having a meeting together. It doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So these softwares facilitate those meetings in a virtual space. And I talk about that a lot in my work because I think it's very important, the space in that you work. So it's really like, yeah, just managing those different softwares and making sure you are kind of strict with the boundaries of that software, because the chat that you have in work when you're sitting next to someone is different to the chat you have over in the lunch station. So I think managing those boundaries appropriately, making sure communication is clear and like appropriate for the channel that you're putting it in, and that you're using the appropriate software, can be a challenge in itself. So one of the great things about the progress of technology is the increase in communication, but the increase in communication can also be its biggest downfall. So managing those communications properly and making sure they're consistent and make sure that everyone is connected is important, but also making sure that people know that they can switch off and they can put on do not disturb, and that they have times where they can do that is just so important. And if your work isn't doing it, ask for them to do it, because I think it's so important to be able to feel like we can log off and that we can have a break and do things that we need to do during COVID.
Yeah, you're right. It is totally a danger of this new working world is the 24-hour working, isn't it? So it's sound advice. So this is all great stuff that you've done in your research. How do you plan for people to be able to learn from it, get access to it, and to be able to use it in their work?
Well, like now that it's finished, it'll be going up on like public journal websites where people can access it and read it for free. People who will be doing further study in the future, like people who will be coming after me, wanting to know about how remote working affected different industries as a result of the pandemic. I think it would be a great source of work for that.
Mm-hmm.
It will be sent to people who had like a really direct involvement with the project as well, and kind of just gifting it to organizations that deal a lot with remote working, like the Yuki organization or Game Workers Unite. I'm going to send that off to them. They can read it and enjoy it, and maybe give it to people who might be looking for information about video game development. And eventually, like, the dream would be to have a published version of the booklet, but we'll see how popular it is and see what the demand is like, because that's a lot of work.
So you're going to make it freely available?
No, it's definitely, I think it's important to not put a pay gap up so that people can access the resource freely, because we're already lacking enough information, I think, in terms of like workplace practice in the video game industry. So making that free and available is part of the project.
That's a wonderful thing to do. So you've finished your degree. How does it feel?
Yeah, no, it's incredible to think that, like, after so many years in education that, I'm finished now. I was a college student previously in Ireland, where I did a higher national diploma for 3 years. And then I came here to study for 3 years. So that's been crazy. Like, that's been a roller coaster. Moving into a new country and doing really well over here. It's just been crazy. But I'm so happy to have finally reached that peak, that moment of accumulation of all my work, and now I can show it and be like, this is what I did. So yeah, it's amazing.
It's really wonderful. And I guess, I hope it's not too soon to ask this, but what are the ideal next steps for you?
Yeah, so I'm one of those types of people that has a really in-depth career plan. And I think it's a good sign of any producer, if you ask me personally. But it's just like, I think my next ideal step would be to get into entry-level industry. The most accessible sort of jobs would be like associate producer or like junior producer roles, which are like you'd be working under someone who's also doing production work in a video game industry, and you get taught into how to, do it correctly and how to do it to industry standard. And then eventually like work your way up through the employment chain.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a plan of mine eventually to start my own company once I have enough experience in team management and team development to start my own project and to bring everything from the ground up, basically. And then God knows what awaits me in the future. God knows where I'll be. It's the great thing about game industry.
Wow. Well, that sounds like quite a career, and I look forward to seeing where the future takes you. Niamh, many congratulations. Yeah, so very
Thank you.
for you. I hope you get to enjoy this evening and you get to have a bit of a pause before the work starts on the next step of your journey. But thank you for joining me. I've really enjoyed our chat, and congratulations to all of our graduates out there. Well done. Enjoy the evening, and I'll see you all soon.
Hi, thank you for listening. Bye.